Hey everybody, it's me, Steve SCHNEE, the CD Junkie, and on this episode of CD Junkie, I'm going to be talking about a British band by the name of PREFAB SPROUT. Now, I've wanted to talk about PREFAB SPROUT ever since I started this CD Junkie series, but they have such a dedicated fan base that I was concerned that I'd be torn apart for some of the things I might say by accident or on purpose, so I sort of held off for a good year or so, but I decided, what the hell, I love the band so much, I'm not going to let that stop me anymore. But I'd like to start these episodes out with telling you how I got into the band. It was 1984, and I was into bands like Aztec Camera, the Bluebells, Orange Juice, all these bands that were taking 60s influences and sort of sidestepping the whole synth pop thing and just keeping the music real basic, melodic, and wonderful. And so I read a review of PREFAB SPROUT, and this review, I don't remember if it was in NME or Melody Maker or Sounds, but it compared PREFAB SPROUT to Orange Juice, Aztec Camera, the Bluebells, and I thought, okay, that's a band for me. Now, the album was only an import, so one day when I'm in Costa Mesa, I'm at Music Market, which was a fantastic store, and I'm at Music Market, I'm flipping through the S section, there it is, the album Swoon by PREFAB SPROUT. They had misfiled it under Swoon as the band name and PREFAB SPROUT as the title, but I found it was in my hand, and I believe it was mismarked because it was basically the same price as a 12-inch single at that time, an import 12-inch single. So I immediately bought it. So I took it home and threw it on the turntable and expected this just joyous, wonderful acoustic and electric pop, and I put the needle down. And what I got was, well, they used the same instruments as Aztec Camera, the Bluebells, and Orange Juice, but it was something entirely different, something entirely unique. It wasn't your standard chord progressions. I'm not a musician, so I can't tell you what chords go together. These chords were so weird, and I mean, they were more jazz chords, and it wasn't just typical rock and roll. It was something entirely different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that album right here. This is the album Swoon. Now, the band formed, I think, in 1978. There was Paddy McAloon and his brother Martin. And then I think Wendy Smith joined as a vocalist somewhere around maybe a year or two after that. But by the time this album came out, the band had released 2 singles, which didn't make the album. But I will tell you right now that this album, not only was it completely different from what I expected, it was exactly, I think, what I needed. It was just another stepping stone into another musical direction that I was not prepared for, but I was just eager to jump in. And songs like Don't Sing and, Here on the Eyrie and Cruel is one of my favorites. Cruel always reminded me of Neil Diamond during the verses of that song. I don't know if that fits with anybody else, but Couldn't Bear to Be Specials on there, Technique. This is such a great, fantastic album, but it's entirely different. It's as if Paddy decided to take us all on this really unique journey into, like, his mind, because it doesn't sound like he's trying to be a genius. He's just a genius. This 1984 album is a pure delight. Anyway, 1985 comes the album Steve McQueen. It was released in the U.S. as Two Wheels Good. Now, this is the deluxe edition that contains a remastered version of the album, plus updated acoustic versions of 8 of the album's tracks. And this is a complete step forward. You know, this is like going from the Beatles' second album to Sgt. Pepper in one step. It's amazing. A lot of that is due to the fact that Paddy's songwriting's far more focused, and Thomas Dolby, yes, the She Blinded Me with Science, Thomas Dolby, produced this album. But it's not a synth pop album. There's keyboards in there for flavor, but it's still strictly guitar, bass, drums, vocals, great harmonies between Paddy and Wendy. Great songs in this album include Fair and Young and Bonnie, Appetite. When Love Breaks Down is one of my absolute favorites. Goodbye Lucille, which is also called Johnny Johnny. Moving the River. It's such a fantastic, warm, exciting, yet soothing album. It's 2 steps beyond beautiful. It's just an absolute masterpiece. And I think that everybody who is a Prefab Sprout fan, just loves every moment of this record. This is the album that Neil Conti joined on drums, and he'd be with them for the next few years. And of course, you got Patty and Wendy and Martin right there. So that's Steve McQueen, also known as Two Wheels Good, that came out in 1985. An absolutely gem of an album. Now, this is where things get a little strange in terms of the way that I'm going to present them. This album here, Protest Songs, was not the next album released, but it was the next album recorded. So after Steve McQueen, the band wanted to have Thomas Dolby produce their next album, and Thomas Dolby, I guess for some reason, was not available, so we told him, hey, do it on your own. So they went in the studio and they recorded the album Protest Songs. And there's some great songs on here, like World Awake, Life of Surprises, Tiffany's. It's a great album. But sonically and songwriting-wise, it sounds like it would have fit right in between Swoon and Steve McQueen, but it was recorded after Steve McQueen. Not quite as good as the previous two albums. It's still a great collection of songs. There you go, Protest Songs. The next official album was From Langley Park to Memphis. This came out in 1988. Now, this was as bright and colorful as this album cover. There's a lot of great songs on here. It's a little schizophrenic because they have different producers. I mean, Thomas Dolby produced some of the tracks. John Kelly did. Patty produced some, or co-produced. Andy Richards. And it's a great collection of songs. And it just goes from style to style. There's this really kind of goofy, upbeat King of Rock and Roll. Cars and Girls is like this great, bombastic anti-rock song. And then there's, Venus at the Soup Kitchen, and I Remember That as this great gospel sound. Nightingales, Hey Manhattan, Golden Calf is just a great rock and roll song. It's really difficult to compare albums because Patty's songwriting is constantly evolving and changing, and he's adding new influences. This album sounds like could have been made by a couple different bands, but all those bands were great. So From Langley Park to Memphis, 1988. 1990, they finally got Thomas Dolby to produce a full album again, and that's Jordan the Comeback. And this is a sonic delight. It's an adventure. It's just a wonderful album that touches on so many styles, so many moods, so many thoughts. Supposedly it's a concept album. I don't understand concept albums, but it's just chock full of great songs. Looking for Atlantis, Wild Horses, Machine Gun Bees, Carnival 2000, We Let the Stars Go, Jesse Jane's Bolero is one of my favorites, All the World Loves Lovers, and it's just a sonic delight. It's a parade of sounds and aural colors, and it's just an absolutely fantastic album. Jordan the Comeback, 1990 by Prefab Sprout. 1992, out came the compilation called Life of Surprises that had 2 non-album tracks plus the best of tracks on the albums I've already showed you. Now, again, I'm kind of going off course here. I'm showing you albums as they were recorded and not as they were released. After Jordan the Comeback, Patty basically created demos for a new concept album that he was planning to release. Now, it's pretty much all created in the studio, all electronic, no other band members involved. And then it got put on the shelf, and they recorded other albums. But in 2009, the album came out, but it's actually recorded in 1993, and it's called Let's Change the World with Music, and I love this album so much. Some people are going, whatever, it's keyboardy, it's, but it's just a great collection of songs. Some of my favorites are like Ride and Earth, The Story So Far, Music is a Princess, I Love Music, Let There Be Music, Meet the New Mozart. It's a fantastic collection about Patty's love of music and how music affected him and how it affects other people. So Prefab Sprout, Let's Change the World with Music, stellar, 100%. Everybody should own this. Now let's go back into chronological order. Again, the next album was 1997, Andromeda Heights, another great collection of songs. Electric Guitars is on this, Prisoner of the Past, Life's a Miracle, another one of my favorite Prefab Sprout songs. This is not quite the sound of Jordan the Comeback. That big bombastic Jordan the Comeback, they sort of came back down to earth a little bit, and this is a little more earthy, but still wonderful. And I think by this time, maybe Neil was gone. I know definitely by 2001, and Gunmen and Other Stories, Prefab Sprout was down to a duo of Patty and Martin McAloon. And I love this album, produced by Tony Visconti. The concept of the album is Western themed, but it's not country music. It's the typical acoustic and electric with some keyboards, great harmonies, great hooks. Patty just keeps evolving and creating some of these songs that they aren't just influenced by Lennon and McCartney or by Ray Davis. They're influenced by Lerner and Lowe and Rodgers and Hammerstein and guys like that. I mean, just a great mixture. But this album here is very emotional, in my opinion. There's great stuff on here like Cowboy Dreams and Wild Card of the Pack, I'm a Troubled Man, Cornfield Ablaze, another one of my favorite songs. Everybody seems to not like that one. But this does contain the one Prefab Sprout song that I will never listen to again, and that's a song called Farmyard Cat. The rest of the album is A+. Farmyard Cat. Now here's where we get confusing again. 2003, Patty released an album called I Trawl the Megahertz. Now I assume that it was released under his name because it's very different from Prefab Sprout. In fact, I think there's only one song on it that he actually sings on, and he doesn't even sing the entire song. Most of this album is instrumental, and although I didn't take to it right away, I will tell you that eventually I just caved in, and it's such a beautiful piece of work. Just the title track alone, which is like 20 minutes long, has these recurring musical bits that just melt me. It's such an amazing audio listen, but it's very different. It's, like I said, almost completely instrumental. It's classical in some ways, jazz in some ways, pop in some ways, but I Trawl the Megahertz. Now this is where it gets confusing. I thought back in the day when this came out that Patty had released it because it's so different than Prefab Sprout. Well, I guess that wasn't the case, because in 2019 they reissued this album with a different cover, remastered as Prefab Sprout. So I think that's probably going to confuse a lot of people, as if my video isn't confusing enough with all these things recorded at different times and released at different times. But I think they should have kept it as a Patty album, but of course I'm not going to complain because it's a wonderful album. But it should stand alone from the Prefab Sprout catalog, in my opinion. Anyway, 2013 is their most recent studio album. That's called Crimson Red. It's just a great return to form to the old Prefab Sprout sound. But Prefab Sprout at this point is now only Patty. His brother Martin's not doing it. Because, see, Patty's had a lot of health issues. He had glaucoma issues, had surgeries in his eyes to where he was almost blind, and I believe that he has to wear glasses now. Then he had hearing problems. I don't think it was tinnitus, but it was something like that, to where he was bedridden for months. So for health reasons, and they're not drug or alcohol induced, it's just bad luck for such an amazingly talented singer-songwriter. But he was able to put this album out, and it's stunning, it's wonderful. And a song like The Best Jewel Thief in the World shows you he can still write a great pop song, but then a track like Grief Built the Taj Mahal is just devastating and emotional. This is just a great album. Devil Came A-Calling is great. Mysterious, Adolescence. It's just a great collection of songs. Again, acoustic and electric guitar based. Most everything is written and performed by Patty, because it's difficult for him to work with anybody now because of his health issues, but he's still a genius and he's still wonderful to listen to. And I recommend that anybody who wants to be touched by a singer-songwriter or a band, anybody who wants to immerse themselves into something worthwhile, something deep and thoughtful, but still fun and joyful, you should definitely check out Prefab Sprout. They are truly one-of-a-kind, unique. No matter what I've said about them, they're better than that. So anyway, that's it. I appreciate you sitting around and allowing me to babble about Prefab Sprout. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe. And until the next time, remember me. I'm Steve SCHNEE, the CD Junkie.